The text lit up the screen of my phone at exactly 6:32 p.m. on March the 15th, 2024. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. The message read, "I'm stuck at work, big deadline. I'm so sorry, babe. Happy 10th anniversary. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Love you." It was followed by 3 red heart emojis and a little yellow face blowing a cartoon kiss. I stared at that glowing screen in the dimming light of the early evening. That is the digital shorthand of a woman who had been lying to me for 14 months. A woman who had grown so incredibly comfortable with her own deception that she could casually decorate her betrayals with little cartoon hearts. I was sitting in the driver's seat of my work truck, parked in the lot outside of Bastions. It's a high-end French-American restaurant situated on East Carey Street in Richmond's Shockoe Bottom. I was wearing a charcoal suit I had purchased just 3 days prior specifically for this night. I didn't buy it at Nordstrom or some upscale boutique. I bought it at a consignment shop on Broad Street. Master electricians don't operate on Nordstrom budgets, but a man's 10th wedding anniversary is a milestone that only comes around once in a lifetime. I wanted to look like I understood the gravity of that. Resting on the passenger seat beside me was a bouquet of stargazer lilies. They were Paige's absolute favorite. They were the exact flowers she had carried down the aisle at our wedding. Every single March 15th for the past 10 years, I had arranged for a bouquet of them to be delivered to her office. But this year, I decided to pick them up myself. I wanted to hand them to her personally across a candlelit table. I wanted to watch her face. I wanted to see if she still looked at me the way she did when she was 29 and I was 32. Back when we were standing in a church in Church Hill, earnestly promising each other forever. I read the text message again, stuck at work. I almost put the truck in reverse and drove home. I almost picked up the phone to call my buddy Knox to see if he wanted to sit on a porch and drink a cheap beer. I almost let another evening silently disappear into the dull routine of a man whose wife was perpetually busy, perpetually working late, perpetually just out of my reach. But I had already paid for the reservation. It required a non-refundable deposit of $80. That might not sound like a fortune to some, but when you are the owner and operator of a small electrical contracting business, $80 is $80. I figured I would go inside, eat a high-quality dinner alone, drink a glass of something ridiculously expensive, and toast to a decade of marriage all by myself. That single decision, the choice to turn off the ignition, step out of my truck, and walk through the front doors of that restaurant instead of driving home, is the precise reason I am telling you this story today. I walked into Bastions at 8:10 p.m. The air smelled of roasted garlic, expensive perfume, and old money. The hostess gave me a sympathetic smile and seated me at a small, cramped table near the back. It was situated right next to a window that offered a stunning view of a brick alleyway. It wasn't exactly the pinnacle of romance, but it perfectly suited a man eating alone on his anniversary. I ordered a glass of Barolo. I carefully set the bouquet of stargazer lilies on the empty chair across from me. I picked up the leather-bound menu. And then I looked up. Across the dimly lit restaurant, partially obscured behind a decorative wooden screen that separated the main dining floor from a more intimate, secluded section in the far corner, I saw a black dress. It wasn't just any black dress, it was the black dress. It was the exact dress I had purchased for Paige for Christmas 3 months ago from a boutique in Carytown. I remembered the night she tried it on in our bedroom. I remembered how she twirled in front of the mirror, looking back at me over her shoulder, and said, "I'm saving this for something special." She was wearing it tonight, at Bastions, on our 10th anniversary. The very anniversary she was supposedly too swamped with deadlines to celebrate with her husband. She was sitting across from a man. He had perfectly styled silver hair, a deep, expensive tan, and was wearing a tailored suit that undoubtedly cost more than the remaining balance on my truck payment. He was leaning intimately toward her, his hand resting casually on top of hers on the crisp white tablecloth. There was a silver bucket chilling a bottle of champagne on the table. They were drinking from those impossibly thin-stemmed glasses you only see in establishments where patrons spend money like it's water. He murmured something. She laughed. It was the laugh I used to hear echoing across our kitchen when I would say something that genuinely caught her off guard. The unguarded laugh. The real one. She was freely giving that piece of herself to someone else. And then as I watched my blood turning to ice water, she leaned across the table and kissed him. It was not a polite peck. It was not a quick social greeting. It was a real kiss. The kind of kiss that carries the heavy weight of shared history, deep intention, and the silent promise of what is going to happen in a hotel room after dinner. It was the kind of kiss I had not received from my own wife in over a year. I suddenly couldn't breathe. The ambient sounds of the restaurant, the delicate clinking of silverware against china, the low murmur of wealthy conversations, the soft, rhythmic jazz drifting from the concealed ceiling speakers, all of it violently collapsed into a single, high-pitched dome in my ears. It sounded exactly like the terrifying hum a high-voltage wire makes right before it snaps. My hands gripped the thick wooden edge of my table so hard that the knuckles instantly went bone white. My field of vision aggressively narrowed until all the peripheral world fell away. All I could see in the center of my sightline was that sleek black dress, that immaculate silver hair, and that devastating kiss. I stood up. I was going to walk across that floor. I was going to grab the edge of their table and flip it into the air. I was going to stand over my wife on the night of our 10th wedding anniversary and loudly ask her how the big deadline was coming along. I was going to manufacture a scene so chaotic and destructive that every single person in that dining room would remember it vividly for the rest of their natural lives. I made it exactly 2 steps before a hand clamped down hard around my forearm.
Sit down.
The voice was female. It was low and it possessed a terrifying kind of calm. It wasn't the relaxed calm of a casual diner. It was the controlled, rigid calm of a person who has spent a lifetime training themselves to remain perfectly steady in situations where normal people shatter into pieces. I turned my head. A woman I had never seen before in my life was standing right beside my table. She looked to be in her late 40s. She had dark hair pulled back severely tight, and she was wearing a sharp navy blazer over a crisp white blouse. She wore zero jewelry, save for a heavy watch on her wrist that looked entirely functional rather than decorative. She possessed the rigid posture of someone who had spent decades standing in rooms where the exact way you stood mattered. It screamed law enforcement or military, a profession that required the human body to be utilized as a weapon or a tool, not an ornament. I glared at her, the adrenaline screaming through my veins. Let go of my arm.
Sit down first.
Lady, I don't know who the hell you are, but my wife is sitting right over there kissing another man. I'm about to make the biggest mistake of your life if you don't take your hand off me.
I know exactly who that man is. I know exactly who your wife is. I know exactly what is happening at that table right now, and I need you to sit down, because the real show is about to start.
Something in the absolute bedrock of her voice stopped the forward momentum of my body. It wasn't just the words she spoke. It was the terrifying certainty behind them. This woman was not guessing. She wasn't improvising to prevent a bar fight. She knew a secret that I didn't, and the weight of that knowing was so solid I could physically feel it. As a builder, you learn to feel the structural difference between a wall that is load-bearing and a wall that is just a cheap partition. This woman was load-bearing. I slowly let out a breath, the tension leaving my shoulders just enough to bend my knees. I sat back down in my chair. She seamlessly slid into the seat directly across from me, casually occupying Paige's chair, right next to Paige's anniversary lilies.
My name is Vivian Hill. I'm a private investigator.
She reached inside the breast pocket of her navy blazer, produced a matte black business card, and slid it smoothly across the table using just 2 fingers. I stared at the card, then back up at her gray, unblinking eyes.
I was hired 3 months ago by a woman named Marguerite Ryland. Does that name mean anything to you?
Number.
It will. Marguerite Ryland is the second ex-wife of the man your wife is currently kissing. His name is Sterling Mercer. He is the CEO of Mercer Gaines Capital, which is exactly where your wife works. And their little affair over there is about to cost him $5 million.
I just stared at her. my mind struggling to process the math of the devastation. I looked past Vivian's shoulder. Across the restaurant, the waiter was arriving at the corner table, pouring Paige and Sterling a second fresh bottle of champagne. My beautiful stargazer lilies were already beginning to wilt in the chair beside me, and a stranger in a navy blazer was calmly informing me that the utter destruction of my 10-year marriage was merely a subplot in someone else's multi-million-dollar revenge story. I shifted my eyes back to the investigator. I'm going to need you to explain that to me.
I will, but first I need something from you.
What?
Patience. Just 30 minutes of it. You do not approach them. You do not confront them. You absolutely do not let them know you are in this room. I have a colleague sitting in a car outside with a telephoto lens, and I have another colleague currently positioned at the Jefferson Hotel, where Mr. Mercer has a standing. Weekly reservation in room 412. If you blow this up right now, in the middle of this restaurant, all you will get is a shouting match and a temporary scene. If you wait, you will get everything.
Everything meaning what exactly?
Evidence, leverage, the absolute documented truth about your wife that goes far, far beyond the man she's locking lips with right now. Order another glass of that wine. Take a deep breath and sit quietly while I tell you exactly what I've found.
I ordered the wine. I took a slow, measured breath. And Vivian Hale, this phantom who had just materialized from the shadows to anchor me to reality, began to weave a story that made the expensive Barolo in my glass taste like battery acid in the back of my throat. Sterling Mercer is 52 years old, she said, her voice never rising above that steady, authoritative hum. He founded Mercer Gaines Capital back in 2006, bankrolled entirely by family money. The kind of old Virginia money that comes with centuries-old oil portraits in mahogany hallways and university buildings with your last name etched into the limestone. He's currently worth approximately $40 million. He has been divorced twice. His first marriage ended quietly in 2012. It was entirely unremarkable. No children. His second marriage, however, to my client Marguerite Ryland, ended explosively in 2021. I kept my eyes locked on Vivian. Why did it end? Because Marguerite discovered that Sterling was having a long-term affair with his executive assistant, a woman named Elise Corwin. I felt something heavy and cold shift violently in the center of my chest. Executive assistant. Elise worked for Sterling for 4 years. Vivian continued, her gray eyes clinically observing my reaction. The affair lasted approximately 2 of those years. When Marguerite found out, she didn't just get mad. She hired an attorney who was very, very good. The resulting divorce settlement was $8 million. But it included something highly unusual, a morality clause. What exactly is a morality clause? I asked, the words feeling thick on my tongue. It's a contractual provision stating that if Sterling engaged in another workplace affair within 5 years of the final divorce decree, he would owe Marguerite an additional $5 million penalty. In the state of Virginia, morality clauses in divorce settlements are absolutely enforceable if they are specific and agreed upon by both parties. Sterling's attorney explicitly advised him not to sign it. He signed it anyway, simply because he was arrogant enough to believe he could control himself. She paused, letting the silence stretch for a fraction of a second. He could not. So Paige, your wife, is Sterling Mercer's current executive assistant. She started at Mercer Gaines in 2018. Based on my extensive surveillance over the last quarter, the affair began approximately 14 months ago, in January of 2023. 14 months. I sat there and desperately tried to mentally trace the wiring of the last 14 months. I thought about the sudden unexplained late nights at the office, the sudden influx of work emergencies that required her to step into the other room to take a phone call. I thought about the new clothes that magically appeared in her closet. Expensive, tailored things that absolutely did not match the arithmetic of her stated salary. I thought about the creeping glacial distance in our bed, the mundane conversations over the kitchen table that hovered in the air and went absolutely nowhere. The profound, hollow feeling of slipping inches away from a woman who was already residing somewhere else entirely in her mind. 14 solid months of meticulously crafted lies. And I, the trusting, dutiful husband, had swallowed every single one of them. "There's more," Vivian said quietly. "And this is the part that matters to you directly." She reached into the inner pocket of her navy blazer again and produced a tightly folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement. She slid it across the table until it rested right in front of me. "Doing my financial investigation of Sterling, my forensic accounting team discovered that your wife has been receiving consistent payments far beyond her standard corporate salary. Approximately $15,000 per month directly deposited into a personal account at Virginia National Bank. An account registered in Paige Sable's name and Paige Sable's name only." I looked down at the statement. I saw the account number. I saw the routing number. And then I saw the balance. $211,847.33. Below that, a list of monthly deposits, each exactly for $15,000, originating from an entity called Mercer Advisory LLC. "What the hell is Mercer Advisory LLC?" I whispered. "Ah," Vivian said. "That is a shell company registered entirely to Sterling Mercer. It has no employees. It has no clients. It has no physical operations. Its sole purpose, as far as I can determine through the corporate registry, is to seamlessly funnel illicit payments to your wife. $15,000 a month for 14 months. Approximately $210,000 total." I set the bank statement down on the wood. I picked up my wine glass, then immediately set it back down without taking a single sip. My hands were doing that terrifying thing again. The violent trembling, the complete loss of fine motor control. I had never experienced this in 20 years of working with live wires, junction boxes, and high-voltage panels that could literally stop your heart if your hands weren't perfectly steady. "She has been hiding $210,000 from me," I stated, trying to make the facts sound real in the air. "Yes. While we are legally married." "Yes." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, looking up at her. "Your client is Marguerite, the ex-wife. What do you possibly get from helping the husband?" Vivian looked at me with absolute directness. "My job is to build a bulletproof case that triggers the morality clause for my client. Your wife happens to be the evidence. A relationship with Sterling is the trigger. The photographs the hotel records, the financial trail, all of that proves Sterling violated the clause. Marguerite gets her $5 million. And you get the collateral benefit. Everything I've gathered about your wife, the affair timeline, the hidden account, the undeniable pattern of deception is yours to use in your own divorce proceedings. I'm not your investigator, Mr. Sable, but the evidence doesn't care who uses it." She leaned forward slightly. "I was a police detective for 14 years before I became a PI. I've seen a lot of marriages end. Most of them end incredibly messy. Screaming matches, thrown dishes, pathetic scenes in public restaurants exactly like this one. Those endings feel incredibly satisfying for about 10 minutes, and then they turn into years of legal regret." She nodded subtly toward the corner table. "What I'm offering you tonight is the other kind of ending. The kind that's quiet, calculated, and devastating. The kind where you walk out of this restaurant tonight without saying a single word. And 6 months from now, the woman who lied to you on your anniversary is sitting in a courtroom watching everything she built on your trust collapse completely around her." I sat there in the dim light for a long time. The soft jazz played from the ceiling. The wealthy patrons of the restaurant murmured over their expensive plates. My wife drank vintage champagne with a man who had paid her $210,000 to betray my family. And right there, in the span of 3 heartbeats, I made a decision. "Tell me exactly what to do," I said. "Go home. Kiss your kids goodnight. Act completely normal. Tomorrow morning, you call an attorney. I'll send you my full, unredacted case file, the timestamp photographs, the hotel records, the financial analysis. Your attorney will know exactly what to do with it. And tonight, They are going to leave this restaurant and go to that hotel. My colleague will document every single moment of it. Video of them entering and exiting. Credit card receipts for the room. By tomorrow morning, I'll hand you an evidence package that no family court judge in the state of Virginia will ever ignore. I looked at the stargazer lilies resting in the chair beside me. I had bought them for a woman who simply didn't exist anymore. Maybe she had never existed at all. Maybe the woman who had stood in that church in Churchill and promised me forever was already someone else entirely. And I just couldn't see it because love is the thickest blindfold we ever tie on ourselves. I stood up. I pulled a $50 bill from my wallet and left it on the table for the wine. I picked up the bouquet of flowers. Mr. Sable, Vivian said quietly. I turned back to look at her. Happy anniversary. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sarcastic in the slightest. It was just a quiet, solemn acknowledgement of a woman who had spent a decade watching people's lives get brutally dismantled. A woman who knew that sometimes the only real comfort you can offer a bleeding man is the absolute truth, even when that truth is a knife. I walked out of Bastion's at exactly 9:07 p.m. I walked straight through the main dining room, past the bustling bar, past the smiling hostess stand, and out the heavy glass front doors into the brisk March night. I did not look at the corner table. I did not look at Paige. I did not look at the black dress I had bought her with my hard-earned money, or the champagne I hadn't paid for, or the silver-haired man whose hand was resting on my wife's hand on the night that was supposed to be exclusively ours. I got into my work truck, carefully placed the lilies on the passenger seat, started the engine and drove home through the neon-lit streets of Richmond. When I unlocked the front door, the house was quiet. Ryland and Odette were already asleep. The babysitter, a sweet high school girl from 3 houses down, was sitting on the living room sofa watching a video on her phone. I paid her hourly rate, added a generous tip, thanked her, and locked the deadbolt securely behind her. Then I walked slowly up the carpeted stairs and stood quietly in the doorway of my children's bedroom. Ryland was 7 years old. He was sprawled haphazardly across his bed the way all 7-year-old boys sleep, every single limb pointing in a wildly different direction, looking like he had been dropped from a great height. His mouth was hanging slightly open. His worn leather baseball glove was resting squarely on his nightstand right next to his lamp, because he had been sleeping next to it every night since I had coached his very first Little League game in the fall. Odette was 4. She was curled into a tight, perfect little ball under her pink blankets, plaiting her frayed stuffed rabbit. Her thumb was hovering just millimeters from her mouth, a lingering comfort habit she was actively trying to break during the day, but kept instinctively returning to in her sleep when her conscious effort finally relaxed. Her dark hair was wildly tangled against her pillow. I knew she would need it meticulously brushed in the morning, and I knew she would fight me on it, and I knew I would be endlessly patient. And we would get through it the exact same way we got through everything else together. I stood completely frozen in that doorway for 20 solid minutes, just watching the rhythmic rise and fall of my children's chests as they breathed. I thought about the woman I had married. I thought about the man she was currently with in a hotel room across town. I thought about the $210,000 she had methodically hidden from our family, and the 14 agonizing months of lies that I had stupidly mistaken for a marriage, simply going through a rough patch. I didn't cry. I desperately wanted to, but the tears absolutely wouldn't come. Something infinitely harder, denser, and colder than tears had permanently formed in the center of my chest. It was something entirely forged in the brutal 10 seconds between seeing my wife kiss another man and feeling Vivian Hale's grounding hand clamp down on my arm. It wasn't blinding rage. It wasn't crippling grief. It was pure, unadulterated resolution. It was the cold, flawless, structural certainty that I was going to systematically dismantle the fraudulent life my wife had built. I wasn't going to do it with loud noise. I wasn't going to do it with a pathetic screaming scene in a crowded restaurant. I was going to do it with the ruthless, methodical precision of a master electrician, a man who has spent his entire adult life carefully stripping wires and building complex circuits behind the walls So the lights stayed on for the people who mattered. The lights were about to go out on Paige. Let me tell you exactly who I am. Because what Paige did to me, the profound depth of her betrayal, and the calculated nature of her deception only truly makes sense if you intimately understand the man she did it to. She didn't just lie to a husband. She lied to a man whose entire existence was built on the fundamental principles of honest labor and visible truths. My name is Aldric Sable. I was born in 1980 in Churchill, which is one of the oldest, proudest, and hardest neighborhoods in Richmond, Virginia. It is the kind of place where the historic houses lean heavily against one another for support, where the wooden front porches inevitably sag under the weight of humid summers, and where the people living inside those drafty walls are inherently tougher than the brick and mortar that surrounds them. My mother Della raised me and my two older brothers entirely alone. She was a career postal worker. For 31 unbroken years, she strapped a heavy canvas mail bag across her shoulder and walked the uneven, root-buckled sidewalks of Churchill. She carried the mail through blistering August heat waves that melted the asphalt, through treacherous January ice storms that coated the power lines, and past the occasional neighborhood dog that decided her ankle looked like a free lunch. She made exactly $38,000 a year at the absolute peak of her career, and she never complained, not once. She never called in sick when her back ached. She never let her 3 boys see her sweat, and she never let us see her cry. She fiercely protected us from her struggle, which meant she was always silently struggling. She taught me without ever explicitly saying the words that endurance is the ultimate currency of a respectable life. When I graduated high school, I didn't have the money or the inclination for a 4-year university. Instead, I became an electrician. I chose this trade because electricity made absolute perfect sense to me in a way that the messy, unpredictable human world simply didn't. I loved the unyielding logic of circuits. I loved the mathematical predictability of the current. I found a profound quiet satisfaction in walking into a dark, dead room using my own 2 hands to trace the fault and making something brilliantly work that hadn't worked before. In a world full of gray areas, a live wire is a brutal, honest absolute. It either has power or it doesn't. I earned my journeyman's license at 23 and my master's license at 27. In 2009, right at the precipice of my 20s, I officially started Sable Electric. I began with a single, rusted white service van, a heavy canvas bag of hand tools, and a $12,000 commercial loan from a tiny neighborhood credit union in Churchill. The loan officer realistically probably shouldn't have approved my application on paper, but he did it anyway. He did it because he personally knew my mother. He figured that any woman who faithfully carried the United States mail through sleet and snow for 30 years had to have raised a son who paid his debts. He was absolutely right. I worked 18-hour days, took every miserable crawlspace job in the city, and paid that loan back in full in exactly 18 months. By the year 2024, Sable Electric had steadily grown into a formidable local business. We had 8 full-time employees, 2 fully stocked service vans, lucrative, long-term maintenance contracts with 3 major property management companies, and a rock-solid reputation across the greater Richmond area. We were known for 3 simple things: showing up exactly when we said we would, doing the highly technical work correctly the first time, and never ever charging a client for things we didn't actually do. My personal take-home revenue after payroll taxes and overhead was approximately $110,000 a year. I wasn't incredibly wealthy, but I was far from poor. I was just a man who had built something honest from the dirt up, and I kept it running smoothly. I met Paige Langford in the late spring of 2012. It was at a casual backyard barbecue hosted by a mutual friend in the Fan District. She was 29 years old, exceptionally beautiful, and working as an administrative assistant at a high-powered downtown law firm while trying to save up money for an advanced certification program. I was 32, 3 grinding years into building Sable Electric. I showed up to that barbecue wearing a faded blue polo shirt that had a distinct dark electrical burn mark right near the collar. I had come straight from an emergency residential job site and simply hadn't had the time to go home and change. I was self-conscious about it, but Paige didn't care about the burn mark at all. In fact, she fixated on it. She handed me a plastic cup of beer and told me with a bright, captivating smile that the burn made me look like someone who actually worked for a living. She said she found it incredibly refreshing after spending 40 hours a week trapped in a sterile corporate office, surrounded by soft-handed attorneys who firmly believed that physical labor was a tragic condition that only happened to other people. We fell in love easily. We dated steadily for 2 years. We were married on March 15th, 2014, in the sanctuary of St. Patrick's Church in Church Hill. It was a beautiful small ceremony with just 70 of our closest friends and family. We couldn't afford a country club, so we held the reception at the local VFW hall, where my buddy Knox's cousin played an acoustic guitar in the corner. My mother made 3 massive bowls of her famous potato salad. Paige's parents drove up from Roanoke and seemed cautiously, genuinely pleased that their daughter was marrying a man who owned his own business, even if the daily realities of that business involved army crawling through rat-infested crawl spaces and wrestling with high-voltage junction boxes. For 8 solid years, our marriage was good. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't spectacular. It was real. It was the specific kind of quiet, functional marriage where you passionately argue about how to load the dishwasher on a Tuesday night, make up before your heads hit the pillows, and drive out to your kid's freezing soccer game on a Saturday morning with bad coffee in a metal travel mug. It was the kind of life built on the silent, deep understanding that the mortgage, the grocery runs, the tired evenings on the couch, all of this was exactly what we had eagerly signed up for. Our son Ryland came into the world in July of 2016. Odette followed in September of 2019. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house on Montrose Avenue. The place was structurally sound, but legally required a total electrical rewiring before we could move the babies in. I did the entire job myself completely alone, over the span of 6 grueling weekends. I ripped open the plaster, pulled miles of fresh copper wire, and installed every single breaker. I did it because that is exactly what an electrician does. You fix the things that are broken, especially when they belong to you. The tectonic plates of our life didn't begin to shift until Paige started her new position at Mercer Gaines Capital in 2018. It was a massive step up from the stuffy law firm. She got significantly better pay, an impressive corporate title, and comprehensive benefits. She was practically vibrating with excitement during those first few months. She would come home and talk about the CEO Sterling Mercer, like he was a fictional character ripped straight from the pages of a glamorous novel. She described this larger-than-life financial titan who effortlessly managed a $200 million fund, wore immaculate custom-tailored Italian suits, and commanded a massive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the James River. I was genuinely happy for her success. I was so focused on keeping my own business afloat and raising our toddlers that I completely failed to notice that the professional admiration in her voice was slowly, quietly mutating into something entirely different, something toxic. The emotional distance didn't happen overnight. It started in late 2022. It was incredibly gradual. The insidious way distance always begins in a doomed marriage. She started working later into the evenings. She came home utterly exhausted, her eyes glued to her phone. She became significantly less interested in the vital small conversations that act as the invisible glue holding a marriage together. The mundane, "How was your day?" The "What funny thing did the kids do?" The "I saw this crazy thing on the highway and immediately thought of you." Slowly, agonizingly, those daily points of connection got shorter. Then they became less frequent. Then eventually they stopped entirely. We still occupied the same house. We still technically talked to each other. We just weren't actually saying anything anymore. I thought it was the intense pressure of her new job. I thought it was the residual stress of raising 2 small children. I genuinely believed it was just the ordinary, expected erosion that every single long-term marriage eventually goes through in the middle years. When the blinding romance naturally fades, the heavy routine stubbornly sets in, and you have to actively decide whether to dig your heels in and fight for it or let the current pull you apart. I actively chose to fight for it. I painstakingly planned the grand anniversary dinner. I went out and bought the new charcoal suit. I arranged for her favorite stargazer lilies. I placed a non-refundable deposit at Bastion's because Paige had casually mentioned in passing many months prior that she had heard it was an incredibly romantic spot. I had carefully filed that fleeting piece of information away in my mind, the way I file everything away, saving it for future use to make her happy. Tragically, she had filed that exact same restaurant away too. Only she was saving it for a vastly different dinner with a vastly different man. The morning after the restaurant, I didn't drive my truck to a job site. I didn't look at any blueprints and I didn't check on my crews. Instead, at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, I walked through the heavy glass doors of Boone Taggart's law firm. Boone was 53 years old. He was a highly sought-after divorce attorney and a former military JAG officer who still carried himself like a man accustomed to giving orders that people followed. His office was located on Main Street inside a massive, imposing stone building that had originally been constructed as a bank in the 1920s. Sitting in that room felt incredibly appropriate because a divorce in the state of Virginia is essentially a brutal financial audit conducted under extreme emotional duress. Boone was standing behind a massive oak desk, pouring thick, black coffee from a stained glass pot that looked like it had been brewing continuously since the Cold War. He didn't offer any empty platitudes or fake sympathy. He just pointed to a leather chair across from him, sat down with his mug flipped open a fresh yellow legal pad, and looked at me.
Walk me through it from the beginning. Leave nothing out.
So I walked him through it. I methodically laid out the entire disaster. The 10th anniversary, the lying text message with the cartoon hearts, the reservations at Bastion's, the black dress. I told him about Vivian Hale materializing at my table. I told him about Sterling Mercer, the ironclad morality clause, the hidden Virginia National Bank account, the shell company, and the $210,000 of concealed assets. Boone listened intently, without interrupting a single time. His pen didn't move. When I finally finished detailing the wreckage of my decade-long marriage, he set his coffee mug down on a coaster and leaned forward, his eyes studying me with a forensic intensity.
How do you feel right now?
I looked at the thick stone walls of his office. I feel like I've spent the last 10 years meticulously wiring a massive house, making sure every single connection was safe and perfect. And someone just walked in and told me the entire structure was tied to the wrong circuit.
That's about right. And I know it burns Aldric. But here is exactly what we are going to do. Virginia is a fault-based divorce state. Adultery is absolute grounds. And thanks to your private investigator friend, you have professional-grade, irrefutable evidence. But the affair isn't even the hammer. The hidden account is. That is the blatant concealment of marital assets, and that alone is going to completely destroy her credibility in equitable distribution. But we can push it further. The fact that the money came directly from her boss, the very man she's sleeping with, and was carefully structured through a fake shell company just to avoid detection. That's not just marital deception. That is a documented financial conspiracy between your wife and her employer to systematically defraud you.
I asked him what that meant for the kids. I told him I wouldn't let her take Ryland and Odette.
She's not taking them. A parent who has systematically lied to their spouse for 14 straight months, deliberately concealed over $200,000, and conducted a reckless affair with their married boss is not a parent the family court is going to view favorably. I'm going to pursue primary custody for you, and based on what you're telling me about this evidence package, I think we will absolutely get it.
What about Sterling Mercer?
Sterling is Marguerite Ryland's problem, and based on the morality clause you mentioned, he's about to have a very, very expensive problem. But his direct involvement with your wife, the secret payments, the LLC, the hotel room receipts, all of that becomes the bedrock of our case file. The judge is going to see the full, ugly picture. 6 months, Aldric. Maybe less if she's smart enough to panic and settle out of court. But I want to tell you something right now. You did the exact right thing last night, sitting quietly in that chair instead of walking over to that table and tearing the restaurant apart. 99% of men would have blown it. You didn't. That excruciating patience you showed, that is exactly what is going to win you this case.
I nodded, but I didn't feel patient. Inside, I felt like I was being slowly electrocuted. But as I would soon learn, that is exactly what patience feels like when everything is on the line. Vivian Hale delivered her promised evidence package to Boone's office the following week. It was just as she had guaranteed, completely airtight. There were 47 high-resolution photographs spanning 3 months. There were perfectly time-stamped logs of them entering and exiting the Jefferson Hotel, room 412, on 11 separate occasions. There were credit card receipts, the complete hidden bank account statements, text messages obtained through legal discovery, and a thick file documenting the affair of Elise Corwin, the previous executive assistant, which firmly established Sterling's repeatable pattern of predatory behavior. Boone filed the paperwork for a fault-based divorce on April 3, 2024. Paige was legally served at her office. The process server walked right past the receptionist at Mercer Gaines Capital and handed Paige the thick manila envelope right in front of Sterling Mercer's magnificent corner office with the beautiful view of the James River. That evening, she came home in absolute hysterics. I was waiting for her. I was sitting quietly at our kitchen table, the exact same wooden table where we had eaten a decade's worth of dinners, the same table where Ryland did his math homework and Odette drew crayon pictures of horses. I had a simple glass of ice water resting in front of me, nothing else. No dramatic documents spread out, no printed photographs, no props. It was just me. The cold truth and the quiet certainty that I had built my case exactly the same way I built everything else in my life. Carefully, correctly, with the dangerous wiring hidden safely behind the walls where it belonged. She burst through the door, tears streaming down her face, her makeup ruined.
Aldric, what is this? What is going on? Why are you doing this to me? Is this because I've been working late? I told you, the job has been incredibly demanding.
Paige, stop.
I just don't understand why you're throwing our whole life away.
I said stop. I was at Bastion's on our anniversary. I saw you. The blood completely drained from her face. It happened instantly, exactly the way current dies from a circuit when you violently throw the main breaker. Complete and total darkness. I made a reservation for us, for our 10th anniversary, and I sat alone exactly 2 tables away, and I watched you kiss Sterling Mercer. I watched you do it while the text message you sent me about being stuck at a deadline was still glowing on my phone screen.
Aldric. Oh my God, Aldric, please. It's not what you think.
It is exactly what I think. 14 months. $210,000 sitting in a hidden account from a shell company your boss deliberately created just to pay you for your services. 11 documented visits to room 412 at the Jefferson Hotel. 47 photographs, text messages, credit card receipts. I picked up my glass, took a slow, calm sip of water, and set it back down on the wood. I know absolutely everything, Paige, and I didn't even have to spy on you to find it out. Someone else was already watching Sterling, and they just happened to catch you in the frame.
Who was watching him? Aldric, please, the kids. Think about the kids. Please don't take the kids away from me. We can fix this. I'll end it with Sterling today. I'll end it tonight. We can go to counseling, we can.
You wore the dress I bought you for Christmas to eat dinner with another man on the night of our anniversary. You sent me a text message with cartoon heart emojis while you were sitting across from him drinking champagne. You successfully hid $210,000 from me in a bank account I didn't even know existed. Counseling doesn't fix that, Paige. Nothing on this earth fixes that. She collapsed onto the kitchen floor. She wasn't acting anymore. She was sobbing the ugly, guttural crying of a person who has been aggressively running a high-stakes con for over a year and has finally hit a brick wall at full speed. I let her cry. I stood up from the table, walked upstairs, checked on my sleeping children, and quietly closed their doors so they wouldn't have to hear the sound of their mother breaking. That was the last real, meaningful conversation of my marriage. The divorce dragged on for 5 brutal months. Boone was a machine. He was relentless, structuring his arguments the way I structured conduit. Every connection tight, every junction secure, absolutely nothing left to chance. Paige's attorney desperately tried to fight. He tried to argue in court that the hidden account was merely Paige's personal savings and therefore shouldn't be subject to penalty. Boone immediately presented the Mercer Advisory LLC incorporation documents proving the payments originated from a shell company owned by her lover. The judge was visibly disgusted by the personal savings argument. Her attorney then tried to argue that the affair, while unfortunate, was completely irrelevant to her fitness for custody. Boone presented the timeline. 14 months of systematic calculated deception, the concealed financial assets, the horrific text message sent from the restaurant on the night of our anniversary. The judge sternly noted that a parent who demonstrated such a sustained, profound capacity for deception was directly relevant to evaluating custodial fitness. The hammer fell. The hidden account containing $211,847.33 was completely frozen and subjected to equitable distribution. I got half. Paige lost primary custody of our children. I was awarded full custody of Ryland and Odette during the school week, while Paige received alternating weekends. The house on Montrose Avenue was permanently awarded to me as the primary residence for the kids. Sterling Mercer's reckoning arrived separately, but with equal devastation. Marguerite Ryland's attorney filed the motion to enforce the morality clause in April of 2024. Sterling's high-priced lawyers fought it like cornered animals for 3 months. But in July, a superior court judge ruled the clause fully enforceable. Sterling was ordered to pay Marguerite a $5 million penalty. But the collateral damage was far worse than the check. The fallout in the financial sector was immediate. Once the sordid details and the established pattern of his affairs became public knowledge in Richmond's tight-knit business community, 3 major institutional clients pulled their money from Mercer Gains Capital in disgust. Sterling's prestigious fund, which had been comfortably managing approximately $200 million, plummeted to $140 million in less than 6 months. He didn't go broke. Wealthy men with old Virginia money like Sterling Mercer never actually end up on the street. But he went from being a man who was deeply respected and feared in Richmond to a man who was merely tolerated. For someone whose entire fragile ego and identity were built entirely on status and superiority, that loss of respect was a profound kind of death. Paige didn't survive the corporate fallout. She was quietly fired from Mercer Gains Capital just weeks after the papers were served. They didn't officially terminate her for the affair that would have been a massive employment lawsuit waiting to happen. Instead, she was let go under the convenient guise of departmental restructuring. It is the exact kind of restructuring that happens when a humiliated CEO desperately needs to remove the one person in the building who constantly reminds everyone of his most expensive mistake. She received absolutely zero severance pay, no letter of recommendation, and the ironclad non-disclosure agreement she was forced to sign on her way out the door ensured she could never legally discuss the intimate details of her employment ever again. A few weeks after the ink dried on the final divorce decree, Vivian Hale sent me a manila envelope containing the final investigative report from Marguerite's resolved case. It was perfectly professional, incredibly thorough, and completely devoid of any emotional flourishes. But at the very bottom of the final page, she had written a short note in blue ink. The patience paid off. I hope the next chapter is much better than the last. She was absolutely right. The patience did pay off, and the next chapter is infinitely better than the last. A full year has passed since the night my life was dismantled. It is now March 2025. The anniversary date, March 15th, just cycled back around on the calendar. I didn't go anywhere near Bastions. I didn't step foot inside a high-end consignment shop, and I certainly didn't buy any Stargazer lilies. Instead, when the evening rolled around, I loaded Ryland and Odette into the cab of my work truck and drove us to a loud, chaotic pizza parlor out on Broad Street. We ate greasy pepperoni slices off paper plates, drank from plastic cups, and spent $20 in quarters playing the rigged claw machine in the back corner. Against all mathematical odds, Odette actually won. The metal claw gripped a slightly lopsided, brightly colored stuffed penguin and dropped it down the chute. She screamed with pure, unadulterated joy, a sound so loud and genuine that it completely drowned out every lingering ghost of the previous year. She proudly named the penguin Electric, because, as she seriously explained to me over her slice of pizza, its wide, unblinking eyes made it look exactly like it had been surprised by a sudden shock, which apparently is precisely what electricity looks like to a 5-year-old girl. It was the best anniversary dinner of my entire life. I am still running Sable Electric. The business isn't just steady, it's thriving. We survived the personal storm and actually picked up 2 massive new commercial contracts this year. I recently hired a 9th full-time employee. His name is Darius. He's a 22-year-old apprentice who grew up just a few blocks from where I did in Church Hill. Looking at him is like looking into a time machine. He's all raw ambition and absolutely zero polish. But he shows up to the shop 20 minutes early every single morning. His hand tools are meticulously organized, and he always has his questions ready. Teaching him the trade has given me a new kind of purpose. My buddy Knox still comes by the house on Friday evenings. He brings a 6-pack of cheap beer and a relentless barrage of unsolicited opinions about everything, ranging from my truck's front-end alignment to the current bleak state of my dating life. Which, for the record, is entirely non-existent. I'm just not ready yet. The intricate wiring in my personal life requires a massive, comprehensive inspection before I even think about connecting anything new to the main breaker. My mother Della is 69 years old now. She finally officially retired from the United States Post Office last year. She comes over to the house twice a week to help with the kids. In Della's vocabulary, helping essentially means she completely takes over the entire household, and I am relegated to standing in my own kitchen feeling like a confused guest. I just lean against the counter and watch her work. She cooks dinner from scratch, gives Ryland highly technical batting tips for his baseball swing, expertly braids Odette's wild hair, and does absolutely everything with the fierce, quiet, unapologetic competence of a woman who has been faithfully showing up for 69 years and has absolutely zero intention of stopping anytime soon. You did the right thing, baby, she told me late last month. We were sitting together on the wooden front porch. The kids were fast asleep upstairs. The neighborhood was quiet. She was drinking a steaming mug of herbal tea, and I was drinking the very last of Knox's terrible beer. I looked over at her in the dim porch light. Which part? All of it, she said firmly. Not making a pathetic scene, not shouting in front of strangers, not giving that woman the twisted satisfaction of watching you fall apart in public. I smiled slightly, tracing the condensation on my bottle. You know exactly who taught me how to do that. Me. You and the United States Postal Service. Through rain, snow, sleet, hail, and cheating spouses, you just lower your head and keep delivering. Ryland is 8 years old now. He's in the 3rd grade playing Little League Baseball and stubbornly developing a curveball that his optimistic coach says is highly promising. I, on the other hand, keep telling him to hold off on throwing the curveball until he's at least 12 years old, or he is going to permanently destroy his elbow. He asks about his mother occasionally. I always tell him the truth, but I carefully deliver it in measured, age-appropriate doses. I tell him, Mommy and Daddy just aren't together anymore, buddy. But Mommy loves you very much, and you will see her every other weekend. Odette is 5. She officially started kindergarten back in September. She comes home every afternoon with a backpack overflowing with messy art projects and endless, breathless stories about her brand new best friend, a little girl named Rosario. She still fiercely fights me on the hair brushing every single morning. She cries, she twists, she complains, and I am still endlessly patient. And we still get through it together, day after day. They are the reason I sat back down in that restaurant chair. They are the sole reason I didn't walk across that dimly lit dining room, grab Sterling Mercer by his expensive tailored lapels, and manufacture a violent scene that would have handed Paige's divorce attorney enough legal ammunition to destroy me for a decade. They are the reason I listened to a complete stranger who touched my arm and told me to wait. And looking at them now, sleeping safe in their beds, in the house that I own, they are the absolute proof that the agonizing waiting was worth it. I'm sitting in the cab of my truck right now, driving to a massive new job site out in Henrico County. Ryland is sitting in the passenger seat next to me because it's a scheduled teacher workday, and I'm letting him ride along to see what his old man does for a living. He's got his worn leather baseball glove resting in his lap, pounding his fist into the pocket. He is asking me a million rapid-fire questions about electrical wiring, and I am answering every single one of them with the deep, settled patience of a man who inherently knows that teaching is really just another fundamental form of building. "Dad, how do you actually know which wire goes where?" he asks, looking at the complex schematics sitting on the dashboard. "You read the blueprints, Ryland. You follow the established code, and when the paper blueprints don't match the physical reality of the house, which happens a lot more often than you think, you have to rely on your own experience and your own judgment." "But what if you get it wrong?" he asks, his brow furrowing. "If you get it wrong, the lights simply don't come on. Or worse, something sparks, it shorts out the whole system, and you've got a massive, dangerous problem on your hands. So, you train yourself not to get it wrong. But what if you do?" He presses relentless. "Then you don't panic," I tell him softly. "You stop. You find the mistake. You physically trace the circuit all the way back to the source. You cut out the bad wire, you fix the connection, and you make absolutely sure it never ever happens again." He thought about that for a long, quiet moment, turning the leather baseball glove over and over in his small hands. He looked out the window, then looked back at me. "Is that what happened with you and Mom? Was it a wrong wire?" I looked over at my son. He was 8 years old. He was far too young for the brutal, unvarnished truth, but he was far too smart to be fed a hollow lie. "Something exactly like that, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But the house is completely rewired now, and the lights are back on." He nodded his head, seemed entirely satisfied with that answer, and went back to pounding his fist into his glove. I turned the steering wheel and merged onto the highway. The bright morning sun was breaking through the windshield, casting a warm golden light that made the city of Richmond look like it had been specifically designed to be beautiful. The inside of my truck smelled like dark roast coffee, black electrical tape, and the very particular, undeniable optimism of a man who has meaningful work to do and someone vital to do it for. Exactly 1 year ago, I was sitting in a high-end restaurant watching my wife passionately kiss another man on the night of our anniversary. I was exactly 2 steps away from destroying everything I had built. I was seconds away from making a scene, losing all my legal leverage, and willingly handing Paige the very ammunition she desperately needed to paint me as the unstable, violent husband. But a stranger grabbed my arm. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Stay calm. The real show is about to start." I stayed calm. The show started. And when the curtain finally fell, the lights went out for absolutely everyone who had been secretly operating in the dark. But my lights stayed on because I built the circuit correctly. They always do. Now, before I go, I want to ask you something. I want you to really think about it. What would you do if you were sitting exactly 2 tables away from your spouse on your wedding anniversary and you watched them kiss someone else? Would you confront them? Would you flip the table, shatter the glass, and make a chaotic scene that every single person in that restaurant would remember forever? Or would you have the superhuman discipline to sit back down, listen to the stranger in the navy blazer, and let cold, calculated patience do what blind anger never could? And here is the much deeper question. Have you ever personally discovered a betrayal so profound, so complete, that it instantly and permanently changed the way you see the person you loved the most? I'm not just talking about the physical affair. I'm talking about the entire architecture of the deception, the hidden money, the rehearsed flawless excuses, the casual text messages decorated with cartoon heart emojis sent right from the table where they were sitting with someone else. Have you ever lived through that specific kind of hell? And if you did, how did you survive it? Drop your answer down in the comments below. I promise you I read every single one of them. If this story reached into your chest today and grabbed onto something real, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who desperately needs to hear it right now, especially anyone who might be sitting in a dark restaurant of their own, figuratively or literally, watching something they absolutely don't want to see and wondering what on earth to do next. Just remember, stay calm. The real show's about to start. Comment your thoughts below and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.